Football, America's sport, the gridiron, the pigskin, other creative names that I do not know. In America, we got two big places to watch football. You got the NFL, the professional. Everybody knows about the NFL. Come on. But then we got the NCAA, college football, where we see the emergence of star players before they turn professional. NCAA is a very profitable business, making billions of dollars every year, but it's not a perfect product. They have some really big issues that if somebody doesn't do something about it, they may be in trouble down the line. So here we go. It's time for an analysis of college football. At the end, I want you to ask yourself, who really wins in college football? For the longest time, student athletes haven't been paid. The NCAA has used the same line over and over again. Well, they're student athletes. They don't get paid in money, they get paid in an education. It's even written in their...
Repeat, athletes have to sign this form saying that they are amateurs. They give up any compensation for playing and promise to abide by all the rules in this 440-page manual.
Well, obviously, they're going to these top schools. They must be getting the best education in the country, right? No, they're not. When your whole life revolves around a sport, do you really think you have the necessary time to invest it in your academics? No, you don't. But don't take my word for it. Take the word of NFL player Richard Sherman, who went over his own schedule when he was in college.
Wake up in the morning, you have weights at this time. Then after weights, you go to class. And after class, you go maybe try to grab you a quick bite to eat. Then after you get your quick bite to eat, you go straight to meetings. And after meetings, you got practice. And after practice, you got to try to get all the work done you had throughout the day. I would love for a regular student to have a student athlete schedule during the season for just one quarter or one semester and show me how you balance that.
Well, looking at that schedule, like, only the smartest people could even attempt to have both of those lives. But not everyone that plays football is a genius. So then that must mean their GPA drops. But I thought the whole thing with college was that if their GPA dropped far enough down, that they weren't eligible to play. Well, yeah, about that. Colleges found their own way to, let's say, get them up to snuff. There's an example at UNC where they enrolled their people in so-called paper classes, little fraud classes that they would take over the summer where they wouldn't learn anything and at the end they'd just get an A. And what did that do? Well, it just subsequently raised their GPA enough so that they were, well, look, now eligible to compete for their school and rake in the money.
Basketball players, they would be enrolled, steered to and enrolled in a paper class in African American studies. So we could have a football player who in the spring might have a GPA of 1.4, but in the summertime we put him in 3 paper classes and we get A minus, and lo and behold, he's academically eligible to play football in the fall. And that's how the system worked.
However, it's not all doom and gloom. There is an upside to this. September 2019, California passed a law that would allow students to make their own money from endorsement deals and allow them to hire agents. So at least have some form of revenue that they would make from their own athletics. This caused a whole chain reaction throughout the country, as some states such as New York, Georgia, and Florida begin to consider their own form of legislation that would help pay college athletes. These would range, as some would be a little stricter than the others. New York, for instance, would also allow them to profit a share of ticket revenues, while others, like Florida, tried to speed it up a little, go a little bit quicker. The NCAA tried to fight this, but eventually public pressure got a little too high, and the federal level started getting interested in writing their own legislation. So as a result, the NCAA, earlier this year, the top governing body said that they actually would support a rule change that would allow them, their athletes, to profit off their name, image and likeness, and other deals such as social media or advertisements. However, they did make clear that the university itself could not pay them, and any form or image of any copyright logos of the schools or anything, or the NCAA, was strictly prohibited, and they could not make money from it. But, you know, baby steps, I guess. Well, yeah, the students aren't getting paid, but, you know, at least the competition, you know, is balanced. Like, anybody has a chance of winning in college football. Well, in the NCAA, there are 10 total conferences in Division I. The only thing is, though, only about 5 of them actually matter. This is called the Power 5, and it's the SEC, the Big Ten, the Pac-12, the ACC, and the Big 12. The other divisions, don't get me wrong, they have some good teams, but NCAA, they don't look at them really, because they're not big markets, so they kind of pass them by, don't really care. And in those 5 divisions I've actually mentioned that they actually care about, they include some teams that, frankly, aren't very good. So, you know, they don't really care about those teams either. So, you know, if we want to make it more accurate, we could, you know, make it look a little more like, and now that's an accurate graph showing the actual teams in the NCAA that, you know, they actually care about and have any modicum of a chance. The only thing is, though, on top of that, you do also have to look at the issue of recruiting. Because unlike professional sports, like the NFL, the NBA, they have a salary cap that says, hey, you cannot spend X amount of money more than getting players, or you will pay heavy fines. College football, they don't have that. You literally can spend unlimited money recruiting students. So what happens? Well, you see a big difference when it comes to the big schools. Like, there's a picture right here showing the top schools, their recruiting money. See, like at the top, they're in the millions, 3 million, 2 million, all that. But as you get down, it starts getting lesser and lesser. Now if we compare that with, you know, the rest of it, there's no break in this. This is literally the same graph. The same graph. Just this is just the second half. You see, like towards the bottom, they only spend maybe $400,000. Compare that with the 3 million they're spending. The other teams are spending. That just makes for a very unfair playing field. Big teams like Alabama, Clemson, that are spending millions of dollars in recruitment, they can go all across the country signing the best players, no matter where they're from. The South, the Midwest, the West Coast, East Coast. They can go wherever because they have the money. But smaller schools that don't have as much, they don't have the money to travel across the country signing people from all wherever. No, they have to look local. They have to hope that they're in a state or region in the country that loves football enough that they involve kids young in football. So you got to hope that you're maybe a school in the South or Texas that really, really invests in football, or else you're not going to have a great pick of players compared to these big schools. And you may ask yourself, well, that doesn't seem fair. Exactly, it isn't. It's not fair. Like, if you see games, the big teams, they absolutely steamroll the other schools. Like, their offense destroys the other team's defense, and their defense stops almost every single play of the other team's offense. And that makes much more sense now when you think, oh yeah, one team is spending millions of dollars recruiting the best players, and the other team doesn't have as good players. The worst part is that it starts this big cycle that goes over and over again, because the teams that spend the most money get the best players. With those best players, they win a bunch of games. And then people that are about to graduate and go to college, they look, and what do they see? They see, oh, these big teams are winning. I want to win. So what do? They go to the big schools in order to win and put their names out there in order to turn pro. And then it just starts the cycle over and over again. That every single time they spend money to get good players, win, and then people want to go to those schools, which they sign, and they, all over and over and over again. It's very uneven. It's not 50-50 in games. You have one team that typically steamrolls the other team, unless you're talking about the playoffs. And even then, you can have some games where the other team just doesn't show up. Now tell me, does that sound like a fair sport to you? As previously mentioned, college football isn't the most balanced sport. That's even more compounded when you look at something called revenue games. Now, what's a revenue game? Well, it's pretty much a squash. It's where you take this small school that isn't really great at football and this top contender of a team, and you put them together. What do you get? Well, obviously the big team's going to kill the small team and easily win. Well, then you ask yourself, why on earth would the small schools ever agree to it? Why would they ever want to be like, yes, I would love to play Clemson, Alabama, and lose 70-0? Well, the reason it's sadder than you think, it's money. These small schools, as previously mentioned, they don't bring in the millions of dollars that bigger programs like Alabama and Clemson do. So they need to look to all avenues to generate enough money to keep their programs going. So as a result, they take these games in which, don't get me wrong, they get absolutely obliterated and have zero chance of winning, but they get $100,000 as a result. So to them, it's worth sacrificing their record in terms of money, because at the very end of the day, they can keep their program going. And for the big schools, $400,000 here, $300,000 there, that doesn't matter, because to them, a win is a win. To them, they're not looking to have a good season. They're looking to win the championship. In order to get put in the championship, you gotta have the best record. So they artificially inflate their own record by taking these revenue games in which they play these small teams and easily win. And to them, it's no challenge. They roll over the other team, and boom, they're one win closer to making it to the championship. However, with games like this, where you have absolute huge discrepancies in skill, there's a huge worry of injury. You have these players that aren't as good going against these top tier football players that are probably in peak form, peak athletic form. What happens? Well, the big dudes are going to hit the small guys and win. And sometimes they hit hard enough to seriously hurt the smaller school's players, which jeopardizes their seasons and any chances they have of being seen. And the same can go the other side. You could have a small school where the players know they're not going to win, but they just want to make their name by, I don't know, if you're a linebacker, taking out the star quarterback of this top Division I team. And when you get stuff like that, you get the danger that they're going to hurt them seriously in their own pursuit of glory or status. It's just dangerous. And it's just risks that they shouldn't be taking. What's the point? For both sides. What's the point of getting all that money when you're a joke in college football for these small schools? And for bigger schools, what's the point of getting all these free wins if at the end of the day everyone knows they weren't deserved, that you just did it to artificially inflate your own record? It may appear like an easy decision to make, but like in the long term, I think it may do more harm than actual good to these schools. So let's say you're a big school. Let's say you're in a good conference, you spent millions of dollars on recruiting, and you played some revenue games to get some free wins. So you're up there. Maybe you got one loss, maybe even two. You may even be undefeated. What's the next logical step? Well, that would be the national championship. And the NCAA national championship is divided into the quote-unquote national championship and then 6 bowl games, which are all carried out around New Year's, with the championship being like a week later. The bowl games are each for their own little title, but the real big one is the national championship, which 4 teams are chosen to play each other in a semifinal round, and the 2 teams that come out of that victorious will play each other in the national championship to win the trophy. Well, there's a lot of teams. A lot of them are good. So what decides which 4 teams make it to the national championship? You may think, well, it should obviously be, like the best teams, like compared to records and all that. You'd think that, but NCAA? Nah, son. They do, I'm serious when I say this, they have a vote in which they have a committee of 13 members who are all have some experience in the NCAA and college football. Either they're former coaches, players, trainers, journalists, member of Associated Press, but they have plenty of experience in college football. Those 13 will vote on the top 30 teams. Then they'll compare lists and narrow that list down to 25, which they will rank. In their minds, they'll choose 4 teams, and those 4 teams will then move on to the national championship and the semifinals. Sounds all good, like if all that matters is that they're impartial, that there's absolutely no, but no, what do you think? There's bias. Come on. there wasn't bias, why would I put this in this video? Out of the 13 members, 3 of them have experience in the Pac-12, 3 of them have experience in the ACC, and 4 of them have experience in the SEC. So, despite the fact that they're meant to be unbiased and have a wide view of opinions, the majority of them have bias towards 3 of the top 5 divisions. So, you can see what happens. This leads to an unfair balance where teams from those said conferences are picked more frequently than other teams that you could argue are maybe more deserving, or that maybe they face better teams over the season and they deserve to make it. But no, it's not about how good you are. It's about how big of a brand your school is. You can see this. You can see this by like who's been in the national championship over the past few years. Since 2015, these have been the playoff games. And you'd think, well, these look like top schools. These look like good schools. And you'd be right. But if you look deeper, there's an eerie pattern to these. If you look at them, big schools like Alabama and Clemson have been in all but one national championship since 2015. That's 7 national championships. They have been a part of 6 of them each. And then you have schools like Ohio State and Oklahoma where they've been in 4 out of the last 7. But then you go, well, what about that last spot? You listed 2 teams that are pretty much always in there, and then 2 other teams that alternate. Well, that's when you typically see the wild card team. This could be other teams that maybe have a lucky season and they get in and either get knocked down the first round or maybe even go to the championship. These are teams that, when you look at it, they have 1, maybe 2 appearances tops in the national championship since 2015. Teams like Michigan State, Notre Dame, Florida, even random teams like Washington may have a good season and get randomly chosen to be in the national championship. Well, you'd think, well, at least some teams are, getting seen. But is that a good thing when the other 3 spots are always taken up by the same 2, 3 or 4 teams? When they're always taken up by Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, or Oklahoma? Does that really make for a fun championship? No. You get another Golden State Warriors, Cleveland Cavaliers scenario, where every year, back to back, it's the same teams playing each other. That must be great for fans of Clemson, Alabama, where they get to see their teams always make it far. But for other schools, they get 0 limelight to actually do much. The NCAA would argue that's what the bowl games are for lesser known teams to win, but in all honesty, the bowl games seem more like a pity prize than an actual championship. Like, congrats, you won a bowl game. Maybe you won the Rose Bowl or the Sugar Bowl. But look at this team. This team won the national championship. They're the best team in all of college football. You may be a really good team that won, but they're the best. But if it's the same 4 teams, are they really the best? Or are they just the best team that's liked the most? that makes the most money, that the NCAA wants to be a national championship because they know they'll get ratings. For being college football, it's a lot more elitist than you think. It's the top schools stay at the top, and the bottom schools have very rarely a chance to move up. I don't know about you, but to me, that's not fair. That ruins the sport. When you go into every game being almost 100% sure that, well, I know this team's going to win by a lot. Or I know that at the end of the day, for how good this team is, they're not going to make the playoffs because they're from a conference that isn't really looked at. It ruins the sport because you want things to switch up. You want there to be something different. But in NCAA, it seems like, in college football, it seems like it's just the same thing over and over again. Now, hopefully, as we've seen with issues such as students, athletes getting paid, big changes could be made. There are even theories out there that maybe they soon realign the conferences to be more accurate so that there'd be good competition instead of really good teams and really bad teams. There'd be much more even competition. So I'm hoping that the future is bright for college football, but to be honest, I'm scared. This has been Griffin. Y'all been informed. Peace.